Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really thrilled to be here this afternoon to have this wonderful conversation with you about my book, Own the Arena. Hopefully, you all will find this conversation engaging, enlightening, and informative in teaching you some winning match points, if you will, on how to be the best leader that you can be. My background is very different than most leaders that you have met or come across, from being a professional tennis player for 12 years and then going on into the business world from there, from being a coach to a commentator to then being the chairman and president of the United States Tennis Association. This conversation will bring to light a lot of the challenges that I had, as well as some of the wins that I had in this arena that I reside in. And hopefully, you'll have an opportunity to own your own arena, and that arena will be whatever you desire. It can be your classroom, it can be your office, it can be your home, it can be whatever you desire. So please sit back, pay attention, and let's have a wonderful conversation.
Hey, Katrina, can you hear me?
Hey, Melissa, how are you?
Good to see you. It's been a few months.
It has been.
Yes, well, you actually pretty much did my introduction of you.
No!
But I can do it again if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
So my name's Melissa Alpucci, and I am a 2014 graduate of STHM, where I studied sport and recreation management with a concentration in governance and policy. And I was on the very first board of Temple Saga, who is hosting this wonderful chat with you today. So for everyone who does not know Miss Katrina Adams, I'm going to read this because I don't want to mess it up. But as an accomplished tennis player, she competed for 12 years on the WTA Tour, winning 20 career doubles titles and reaching the quarterfinals or better in doubles at all 4 Grand Slam events. In 2015, she was elected vice president of the International Tennis Federation, and in 2016 was appointed as chairman of the Fed Cup Committee. In 2018, was named chairman of the Gender Equality in Tennis Committee. To add, she was named to Adweek magazine's Most Powerful Women in Sports, listed in 2016 and 2017, and Forbes magazine's Most Powerful Women in Sports list in 2017, along with Ebony magazine's Power 100 list in 2017. She served 2 consecutive terms at the USTA as USTA chairman and served as the immediate past president for the 2019 to 2020 term, and is now an author. So please join me in welcoming Miss Katrina Adams. So first tell me about the book writing process. I was able to read it and I enjoyed it, but I also know a lot of your story. So what went into you writing this book?
You know, it's very interesting because I never really wanted to write a book. I always felt that, my accomplishments, my accolades spoke for themselves, and that I constantly wanted to move forward and evolve to whatever that next chapter in life would be. But I had so many people that really felt that I had a story to tell and so many lessons to teach others. And so once we started talking about it being a leadership book, I said, oh yeah, I can definitely do that. I think it would be fun for me to kind of reflect back on my life, to recognize all the things that I did accomplish, the things that I overcame and obstacles. But it really kind of boiled down to saying, you know what, I have really led an unconventional pathway, if you will. I think people need to understand that there's no set pathway for anyone to succeed and be the best that they can be. And that was really the impetus for me to want to write this book and to share that journey with them.
I'm sorry, if you hear my dog barking, I put her out so she didn't interrupt, but she is.
I didn't hear it all.
Oh, okay, good. So when you were writing this, were there any moments that you left out in your book?
I don't think there are any moments that I left out. I think people always say, do you have any regrets? And I say, no. I mean, the moments are, when you're writing a book, it first of all, it takes time. You have a thought process, you have to put an outline together and really try to come up with the most important elements that you want to share and understand why you're sharing them, because you can write about anything in your life. And so for me, I think everything that I touched upon was very important to understand how and why I did things and how I got to the places where I got to. So I won't say that I left out anything because no, I don't leave out anything.
So when did you know that you wanted to write this book? I mean, your
Uh,
story goes years and years before you were the president of the USTA. So where did you know that you wanted to write this and share your experiences?
yeah, it was really towards the end of my tenure as a president when I realized that what I had just done and accomplished was remarkable, that it was historical, and that it really added value to who we were as an organization, as a USTA, and where I could go from there. I was already involved in the International Tennis Federation, the vice president of that board. So going from a national tennis organization to the global leader of tennis and the who makes the rules of tennis, et cetera. It was something that I said, okay, now is the time to kind of reflect, and then it also allowed me to figure out where it is that I want to go in that next chapter. And it wasn't easy, but it was. I would say it was towards the end of 2018 when I finally came to the conclusion that I wanted to write it. And the book was actually written pretty much in 2019 because it was supposed to come out in July of 2020, but the pandemic pushed it back.
Which would have been great during the WTT season when all my downtime, I would have loved to read it.
Exactly. It would have, well, it would have been the WTT season, the US Open series, all the tournaments leading up to the US Open. That was really kind of the release date was going to be the middle Monday or the second Monday of Wimbledon. And unfortunately, all of that got pushed back.
Well, it's a great book. I loved it.
Thank you.
So going into your playing career, what was the struggle that you overcame that was like the defining moment for you?
Well, I think anytime you're a competitor, you want to win. You want to be your best. And in tennis, if you're not at the top of the game, you're going to lose a lot more than you win, particularly growing up. And I think because of the sport and because of the life skills that you learn through the sport, you learn how to deal with your losses, but you also understand how to deal with your wins because you have to get ready for the next day. And too often you can get so excited about a big win that you're not prepared for the next match because you're still lost in the clouds somewhere. So it's really understanding how to manage your losses with your wins. And as I progressed through my career, when I got a little older, I set a goal that I was going to play until I was 30. Well, back in the 90s, 30 years old, we used to call each other grandma and grandpa. But now you can see the players are playing until they're 40. I mean, the dynamics of the sport have changed physically and mentally to provide longevity to these athletes. But I would say towards the end of my career, when losing didn't matter anymore, when I wasn't upset that I lost and I was planning on where I was going to dinner or what I was doing the next week, that's when I knew it was time for me to turn a corner and change the dial and say, okay, what's next? But you really do have to understand that. And it's just that feeling that you get. It's very hard to tell a professional athlete that it's time to walk away.
Now, did you know when you were playing and getting towards the end that you wanted to be in the sports world and be in that administrative role? Or was there something else that you kind of thought about?
Yeah, no, I actually wanted to go into commentating, which I ultimately did. I mean, I studied communications in college. I had always listened to the commentators on television and felt how I could do it better, how I could add my own twist to it. And it was kind of a natural progression from being a professional athlete going into that role as a commentator. I would say when I was in my second year on the WTA tour, I joined the Players Association Board of Directors. And that was really my first stab at going into the business side of the sport, learning more about the sport, learning more about the rules and what we needed to do and why we were an association, how we could get better, how we could support the players, so forth and so on. And so I served about 10 of my 12 years on either the WTA Players Association board and then ultimately the WTA Tour board because we kind of integrated. And so that's where the business mind started to come. But I really had no intentions of really going down that path beyond my career. It just so happened that as I got involved in the USTA board a few years after I stopped playing and understood what the US Tennis Association was about, really from the grassroots all the way up to the professional level of the sport, then I got a little more interested and wanted to learn more and figure out how I could be more ingrained in the sport and really make a difference and leave my own imprint. And that's where it started to go from there.
And was there anybody who motivated you to do that, whether you were playing or in the business side? Was there a certain person who was your motivator?
I had several people that always felt that I was a good leader and that I could add value. And for me, part of my subtitle was making a difference, and that I could make a difference with being just present. And so actually it was Alan Schwartz, who I call my kind of my godfather. I've known him since I was 7 years of age. He owns several tennis clubs in Chicago. I grew up and playing in one of them. But he was the president of the USC at the time and actually brought me in to be a member of one of the committees. And when I attended this annual meeting, when you have 1,000 volunteers and staff, et cetera, and you really watch them milling about it and really focusing on growing tennis and how they can make a difference, that's where I was like, oh wow, this is pretty cool. This is really interesting. And from Alan, there were other people within the organization, Jane Brown Grimes, John Bogosian, and others that really thought that I had the leadership potential to lead the organization and really started to support me and get behind me and get me to start to think differently.
Now, how about on court? Who was your biggest motivator or role model?
When I turned pro at 19, I actually started playing with Zena Garrison, and who was top 10 in the world. And to be able to travel the world and play doubles with someone of that stature, of that level, obviously I was like idolizing. Oh my goodness, Zena Garrison really thinks that I'm a really good player, et cetera. We won a lot of doubles titles together. But Billie Jean King was a huge mentor of mine. I got to know her while I was in college and then out on the tour. She was a co-founder of the WTA tour and of the WTT, World Team Tennis, that is, and so many other great organizations. And to be able to have someone like that really will put their arm around you and try to help guide you. And she's a person that never tells you what to do. She just asks you the right questions to make you think about what direction you want to go in. And so that was huge to be able to have someone like her and continue to have someone like her that I can lean on. My parents were probably my biggest motivators of all, and providing me the opportunity through the sport and making and allowing me to make my own decisions. So yeah.
I mean, obviously, I've been under Billy's wing since I was 17, starting in World Team Tennis. So I totally get it. Having her on your side you couldn't ask for really anybody better. But was there one person or one moment, one person that you played with, or one moment in any of the tournaments in the Grand Slams that you remember specifically as like your favorite moment?
Well, I mean, there's several. I would say as a rookie, though, I played Wimbledon, played all the Grand Slams, but I think in Wimbledon, I got to the fourth round of singles. I lost to Chris Evert in 3 sets in a match that I was playing unbelievably well in and probably could have won if I had been in better shape. So it was a turning point in my career to make me realize that I wasn't in professional shape physically. Because when you're physically fit, you're mentally fitter. And if you're not in shape, your mind starts to play tricks on you and try to get out of points and situations quicker than you normally would. And we also got to the semifinals of Wimbledon in doubles, semifinals of doubles at Wimbledon that year. And just a few points here or there, could have been in the finals and probably could have won that event as well. So I think that was, at the early stages of my career that really kind of set the pathway for me going forward and understanding what I needed to do to be a true professional athlete and eat better and train better and really plan better.
Absolutely. And I think also with the pandemic, what you're speaking to, having that professional that professional body, right? Coming off the tour and they're, playing every single day, and then they, sit for a few months. And I know a lot of them, and I saw how they had that hard time getting back into professional shape. And it's, I never really know that because I'm not a professional athlete, but you do see it. And that's something that, I didn't even think about, when you go from the juniors to the pro. So you just made me think. So
Well,
thank you.
I said I had my having come from college, I had probably an extra 15, 20 pounds of pizza and beer in me. So that was the meal of champions in college, of
You would
course.
have done well at Maxie's at Temple.
There you go.
So, I mean, you have been somebody on tour who everybody adores, and um, winning the Player Service Award for you. What did that mean for you?
Well, and that was huge because that's an award that you're voted on by your peers. And so it really showed me that they paid attention as to what I was doing for them off the court. And that was, as I mentioned, being on the board. I was on a couple different committees. I was on the founding anti-doping committee for the WTA. I was on the Special Olympics committee and a couple others. And so it really made me realize that my actions were being noticed and that people actually cared. And so it motivated me even more so to be the best that I could be, not just for myself, but in representing my peers on the tour, because we really wanted the best road that we had in opportunities while we were on the tour. I mean, we weren't only just in different cities every week, we were actually in different cities of different countries at different times of our careers. And it's even more expanded now than when I was playing in the 90s. The world has gotten larger. So it was a great honor to receive that award.
And speaking of the going from different countries and different cities, sometimes you're playing one match in France and then you're, playing Wimbledon like a week later. What did you do as a player to keep your body in professional shape while you're jumping countries, oceans, time zones? What was something that was important to you?
Yeah, well, as I matured, I learned that I had to get my proper rest. I mean, you really do have to, and it wasn't hard for us to sleep. I mean, by 10, 11 o'clock, you're exhausted and you're getting up early the next day, but really eating healthy, really trying to stay away from a lot of fried foods and greasy foods and things of that nature, eating more grains, more fruits, more veggies, and protein. It was really about proteins and high carbs for us because we really needed our body to recover. But still, changing time zones, I would say, was the most difficult, particularly going from the US to Europe. UK, it's 5 hours or 6 hours, or the further east you went in Europe. Going down to Australia or to Asia, it was worse, 12 to 16-hour time change. So it's really understanding that the one thing you had to do was hydrate. Drinking water was the key to really kind of flushing out a lot of the bad things that were in your system.
See, something I didn't even know.
There you go.
So when you became the president of the USTA, was there anything that you learned as a player that helped you? I would think that playing and then going into being the president of the USTA, there was a lot of things that you knew that players needed, or tennis in general needed, from the grassroots up. So was there anything specifically that you can think of?
I think the unique advantage that I had was because I was that player. I came in, from the inner city of Chicago in a small program, and in a community where tennis really wasn't prevalent. But going from grassroots tennis to high school, college, professionals, I was a national coach, commentator. I touched every element of all of our stakeholders that our sport really attends to. And so I was able to speak for all of these entities by experience and not by speculation or hearsay. And so that was the advantage that I brought to the role and the position. Also being, an African American woman, I brought another perspective in. I brought the perspective of a diverse background, a different culture that was leading the organization and speaking for the organization. And so I could expand out into more communities that may, I don't want to say overlooked, but they just weren't heard because maybe perhaps their messages weren't, the other leaders didn't know how to receive them. And so diversity of thought, in my opinion, is huge in any arena. Our boardroom was very diverse. We had a very diverse board from, genders, ethnicities, races, etc. But it's very different when you have that leader at the top that's actually speaking for you, or speaking for other cultures, because they see someone different, and now they see themselves in the sport because they see someone different. A person of color. Period. Anyone that's of a BIPOC community, it says, "Wow, okay, this is pretty cool. Let me listen more keenly. Maybe she really understands what I'm feeling, and maybe she can really make a difference."
And actually, that's something that I had a little bit later as a question, but this is something that I know to be truly incredible and super groundbreaking, specifically in tennis. But and I'm going to make sure I do this correctly. You are the first African American, the first professional tennis player, and the youngest person to serve as the USTA president.
Correct.
I mean, it's unbelievable to think that you are the first of many. What do you think that means for young women, specifically of color, that they can one day in this sport be as successful as you are?
No, I think it was huge. I mean, I received a lot of emails and note cards from various people around the country of different backgrounds, congratulating me initially, and then thanking me along the way for speaking for them. And so that you don't really realize how impactful you can be until you're in that role and you're starting to hear and feel the warmth and an embrace from various people. And so, as I mentioned, now you have a group of people that see themselves in your shoes along the way. And maybe it's not to be the president of the USTA, but it's to be the president of something. And so now they actually believe that they can do it because they see it. And I had a huge impact on a lot of young girls that I know for sure in different programs as I traveled around, and they would tell me how inspiring I was. And so for me, wow, it's no greater feeling than knowing that you're impacting a lot. I mean, yes, I was the first. Hopefully, I'm not the last. As far as African American, that my successor, Patrick Galbraith, was a former professional player. So we proved that we can do it and have the mindset to be the leaders of the organization. And I think years to come, we'll see a lot more of diverse leaders within our organization.
And I honestly hope so. I mean, I feel like, especially now in tennis, it's so diverse. I mean, Naomi, for one, who is just killing it right now. But she brings so much culture, being of Asian descent and of African American descent. So somebody like her, or Serena, who is, the GOAT, as we say, and having a mixed daughter myself, it's something that when she sees these guys on and off the court at tournaments, when she's with me, she says, I want to play just like them. And I think
Yeah.
what you're saying is someone sees someone in their shoes, and she's 4. So just knowing that impact that they're making on a 4-year-old, and what you've done for people in my generation who are still young professionals, to know that we can do that is just absolutely remarkable. And when you were named, I was so happy,
Thank you.
knowing your story and knowing the tennis world. So, just so we were, the young professionals that I work with, we were very pleased to see what you've done with the USDA. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was going and expanding the National Center up in New York and here in Orlando, where the Storm plays. So when switching over into that, what did you think, or what were you thinking of? Were you thinking in terms of a player when you were looking at the drawings and saying, this is what these campuses need?
Yeah, so when it comes to the USDA Billie Jean King National Tennis Center, I mean, that was something that had been in the works for years. I mean, for 10 years, we'd been trying to find the right architect that could put a roof over Arthur Ashe Stadium. I mean, that stadium is huge. And that site is actually built on a landfill. So the ground underneath is not the most solid. And
Right.
so in coming up with a structure where the roof could not sit on the stadium because it would sink, it had to be built over it. And that's how we ended up with the structure that we have. And there's, tons of pilings, steel pilings that went down in the ground. So actually my predecessor, Dave Haggerty, was the first president that was actually started the project, but all of his work was done underground. And then everything else that you see was under my leadership. But it's really a team of people. I mean, we have some amazing professionals that work within the USTA. Danny Zausner, who really led that project out at the tennis center, was the main person behind making sure that this transformation happened. And I was just lucky to be a part of it and to oversee it and learn so much about it, and to, yes, have a little input here and there from a former player's perspective as to what would be needed in particularly the new Louis Armstrong Stadium, as far as space for quiet rooms, et cetera. In that, now for the USC National Campus down in Orlando, I mean, that was something we built from the ground up, and it really had a lot of input in how we were situated. When we saw the initial drawings from the architect, again with all the different buildings, it was great in understanding, yes, this is our community tennis building, this is our player development building, and then we have an admin building for tournaments, and then our collegiate center. So there's a lot of different elements down there in Orlando, but it was really cool to see it really erect from a cow pasture, if you will, to be what it is today, and have a huge impact on our community tennis in Orlando. But also we, as a what we call a lab, a workshop, if you will, where everybody from around the country can come, have an exceptional experience, and be able to take their learnings back to their local communities, their local clubs, or local parks, and hopefully implement some of the technology that we have there, or instill some knowledge in the leaders of those facilities to be better and be more operational.
And both campuses are absolutely stunning.
Thank you.
So was that one of the first things that you worked on when you became the president of the USDA? Or what were some of the first things that you knew you needed to do?
As far as capital projects, yes, absolutely. But I mean, our mission is to promote and develop the growth of tennis. So, my number one mission is to try to get more rackets in people's hands and get them excited about our sport and keep them in our sport. So I actually had a few initiatives. One was a Hispanic initiative. I really wanted to focus on going into these Latinx communities and bringing more people to our sport, introducing the sport to not just the kids, but to the entire family, because we're a family sport. And so when you go into these Latinx communities, you realize that everyone is more of a family unit. And so you wanted to approach the sport from a family perspective and not just an individual perspective. So understanding that you had to send the right messengers in with the right message. I put together a task force to really come up with a toolkit, if you will, that could be distributed across the nation to help these local organizations, schools, churches, et cetera, to be able to introduce the sport to the masses without having an official USTA person come in, because it's a community sport. I wanted to make sure that our high school students, we're a no-cut sport. So we have so many high school players that are seasonal players because they're playing multiple sports throughout their high school experience. But we wanted to find opportunities for these kids to continue to practice and learn tennis while they were engaged in their other sports, and so we could keep them in our sport. And those were very important initiatives for me. And sportsmanship, I really focused on sportsmanship. Our sport is built on sportsmanship, but yet you see the behavior of young kids and parents and coaches that is kind of unsportsmanlike, if you will. And really trying to get them to understand, the importance of being nice and calling fair lines. And we created what we call an oath that kind of went around the country at these tournaments where players and parents were signing. So Those are the most important things for me because they really impacted the communities directly. They impacted people directly. And the other projects that we mentioned, the capital projects, yes, those are a much bigger scale, but it's really about putting rackets in people's hands and getting them to love the sport.
And what do you think was your biggest accomplishment outside of playing? So any of the uh, positions that you served, what do you think was your greatest?
I would say right now being an author, something that I never ever dreamed of. Being able to have a book published by HarperCollins or Amistad Book Imprint, to believe in my story, to believe in my journey, to be able to share my journey with the world, um, is a is hugely impactful because it encompasses all the things that we talk about in my career. So you can learn about those things in the book. I mean, obviously, being at the helm of the USTA was huge. It was something that had never happened. I'll always be the first in that role. Hopefully, I won't be the last in that role, and I will make sure that I'm doing my part to make sure that we are nurturing and mentoring other people of color, to make sure that they have that opportunity to be there. I was only the fourth woman still. So, still a long way to go, and making sure that we are having that change at the top of the USTA. But, I'm the vice president of the International Tennis Federation, and one of three women that sit on that board globally. So that's another opportunity to be able to share my knowledge and experiences with people around the world, and getting them to come into our sport.
And going into the book, you open the book and you've got your 12, the number 12. So my favorite was to own your identity. Which one was your favorite when you were writing this? What do you think is the most important to talk about, or the most important to love about yourself?
Yeah, I would say owning your courage, because we have to be courageous to be able to go out on a limb to do anything, right? And owning your courage is owning your identity, because a lot of times we feel that our identity is holding us from being courageous and stepping out because we feel we don't belong, or it's never happened before. But if you can own your courage, then you have the ability to own your identity, to own your voice, to own your network and your village, to own the table. But you can't own the table if you're not courageous, and you can't own your network and go out and surround yourself by these people that can help elevate you if you're not courageous. So I would say that would be the number one. And then obviously owning your possibilities, because their possibilities are endless. The opportunities constantly present themselves to us, but if we're not receptive when they come to us, we don't even know that a door has been opened, because sometimes we're too closed or too nervous or too shy to receive those opportunities that come our way.
And when you did you think of these 12, or did you own these 12, I should say, as a player, or was this more professional?
Combination of both. So, really, the book has 12 chapters in it, and I kind of came up with the winning match points after it was written. And so although the anecdotes don't really match the chapters, most of them do. There's a message coming from those chapters, but it was more about, as a tennis player. Look, I've been very fortunate, to be disciplined in my approach, to be self-confident, to have the self-esteem, to be self-motivated. These are all of the characteristics that our sport teaches us, right? To be able to manage time. I grew up in Chicago, where you're at indoor courts, and you start at this time and you finish at this time. So you got to make sure you get it all in within an hour or 2 hours, whatever your time frame is. Not to be outdoors, all day in Florida. And so those are all the things that we also need as adults, and really going in college, right? Studying, you got to know how to manage your time, know how to approach things, be a little more organized, be disciplined for sure. And then obviously going into your professional careers, you still need those characteristics. So I would say the 12-minute winning match points, a lot of them come from what I've learned in the sport and then parlayed it over into business.
And from all of your accomplishments as a player and in the professional world, what do you want to be remembered for the most?
You know, I'm a person that I try to give my all and to leave an impact on everything that I touch. And so making a difference is huge for me. Um, I would say at the USTA, one of my ending things that I did was got the approval for the Althea Gibson statue to be erected out at the USTA Billie Jean King National Tennis Center. It was approved under my presidency. It was erected the following year in 2019, and that's something that will be there forever for people to understand and learn the history of Althea Gibson, the first Black to break the color barrier in professional tennis. And so, she was there before Arthur Ashe. Maybe if there was no Althea, there might not have been an Arthur Ashe, and so forth and so on, and which opened up doors for me personally, decades later to play in that sport. And so that, but also just being a conscious leader, someone who embraces change, who embraces different cultures, and leave an everlasting impact on others.
And I think what you did was amazing with that statue because, somebody who works in it really didn't know about Althea and only really kind of knew of Arthur Ashe because of the stories. So that is something that's remarkable. And like you said, will always be there. And then one of the other things I wanted to ask you was, where do you think you see our sport going in the next decade? I mean, we've got, like we were talking about earlier, with some of the players being so diverse, and a lot of younger kids now playing. Where do you see our sport going?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's so many opportunities in our sport. I mean, I look at the sport from when I was playing and how much open the world is, right? I mean, when Eastern Europe and Russia opened, the walls came down, then the world got larger. You had so many other athletes with this great talent that started to emerge. And it wasn't just American, Australian, UK centric and French centric with the talent. Now it's global. And so when you look at how it's evolving, the one thing that I hope that continues to evolve is that parity and prize money. The Grand Slams have it, but the tours are still there's still a little gap between the ATP Tour and the WTA Tour when it comes to same events and level of prize money. But I actually see the tours joining at some point, and to where it's just one professional sport of tennis. I think it'll be easier for the fans to watch. I think the players enjoy being at tournaments with each other, and it doesn't mean that they have to play all their tournaments together. They can still have their separate events. But I think just for symmetry along the way, there'll probably be a joint tour along the way, and I think Billie Jean King would approve of that. I mean, she co-founded the WTA Tour with the original 9, in 72 with the Virginia Slim Circuit. And I think the talent will continue to evolve and diversity will continue to grow. And, diversity has a lot of different definitions on it. But when you start to see more African Americans, yes, that will continue to evolve, but we have more Asian Americans now. The one group that I would love to see are more Hispanic Americans in the sport. We have a lot of Hispanics and Latinx in the sport from South America, but you don't really see it so much from within the U.S.
I completely agree. And seeing, knowing Billie's story, a lot of people don't really realize how much that the original 9 in the WTA really has expanded even over the last 30, 40 years. And, I have one more question before we go into some of the questions that the audience has for you. But when we were talking about the women in this sport, what do you think tennis does that is different than other sports? And what do you think that differentiates us from, let's say, like golf or basketball? What are your thoughts on that?
It's a very good question. I mean, when we look at our sport, obviously we are the leader in professional sports, right? The largest global professional sport for women, followed by I would say soccer, and then basketball as far as a global stage. So tennis has been that leader for other sports to know that they can accomplish it, that they can go out and be, a professional athlete globally, not just in America. We've also been the leader as far as prize money is concerned for what is out there, or what's capable to attain. The difference between tennis, excuse me, the difference between tennis and other sports is tennis is individual. We don't have, we're not a part of a team. We get a guaranteed salary. We earn every dollar that we make by our results. Whereas the other sports at least have a base salary of some sort, and then they're able to earn incentives based on their results and how they perform. But I think what the other sports can learn is that never give up, keep striving to be the best, keep striving for parity, for equality, and that someday that will happen. It's happening. The conversation is there, and we have to just keep, unfortunately, we have to keep proving ourselves over and over again. But I think that time it will soon cease, and people will really recognize the value that we as professional women athletes have and bring to the table, inspiring the next generation of our young girls and young women to want to be these athletes and be able to give back and make a difference in their communities, because we are community builders. We are community influencers, because no matter where you come from, you're influencing all these other young people from your community. They say, wow, I want to be like her, or I want to be like her, or wow, I didn't know I could do that. That looks cool. That's what we want to do, is to be able to inspire everyone.
And actually, one more question before we open it to the audience. What would you say to the young women who want to end up, in these leadership roles? I mean, I'm 30 years old. I started in World Team Tennis at 17, worked for Billy and the GM of Orlando Storm. For somebody who has been in this world, I understand it a little bit more, but if there's somebody that wanted to be you, to know what you went through before reading your book, what would you say to somebody who is even younger than me that wants to end up being in your shoes?
Yeah, I would say own your voice. Speak up, learn how to ask questions, be engaged, get advice. Never act like you know it all. Too often, I think we as women feel like we look like we're weak by asking questions, as opposed to being, you're actually stronger because you want to have clarity on things. And, do your research. Make sure that when you walk into these meetings, into these situations, that you're prepared, you understand what you're walking into, familiarize yourself with the group of people that you might be meeting with, find out if you have something in common in their background, if you've Googled them or gone to LinkedIn, et cetera, so that the conversation can be a little more at ease, as opposed to going into the business conversation. But you can accomplish anything you want to if you put your heart and soul to it. But it's a matter of the approach that you take that will allow you to get there. We can't be bullies. We have to be, but we don't want to be combative. That's for sure, because we still have the stereotype of, if we're loud or if we speak up, we're too aggressive. Unlike if our male counterparts are saying the same thing, they're exuding confidence, right? And so we still have to be confident in our approach, but understand that we have to go about it in a different way, and cajoling, if you will, our male counterparts to really come to see what we're saying. But own your voice, ask those questions, speak up. And when you're in meetings, ladies, or in a group setting, and you're sharing a thought or an opinion or an idea, and it kind of gets cut off, or they'll listen to you, and then someone else will go to the next topic without even answering you or responding to you. And then like 5 minutes later, your male counterpart, John, says kind of the same thing, but rewords it. Don't be afraid to say, oh, John, thank you so much for bringing that back up. So as I was saying, make them realize that no, that's my thought, that's my idea, that's my, that's I own that, not you. Or make sure that you have another ally in the room. If you've been in that situation and you have another ally and a male ally in the room, it says, hey, if I ever start to speak up and somebody cuts me off or someone else, can you make sure that you bring it back up and bring it back to me? Because that's the only way that we can continue to own our voice in a lot of these situations where we're the only one. And that's something that I have learned and hope to be able to pass along in the book for others to learn as well.
And you actually nailed it right on the head. In the beginning of your book, you talked about being the USTA president in one of the most dramatic endings to the US Open, which I remember like it was yesterday. And I remember sitting in Arthur Ashe, like just completely in awe of what was happening between Serena and Naomi. And as the USTA president, when you were saying that, and Serena said it herself, the male counterparts say it, and I'm the one that looks crazy. So when you were the USTA president and in that moment, I know you talked about it in the book, but what was going through your head at that moment?
Well, I think at that moment, and reflecting on what had just transpired on the court, it's not the way anybody wants to see any match end or happen in a match, but actually, especially on a stage like a Grand Slam tournament final, right? Where there's a championship on the line, there's history on the line, et cetera. You want the players to go out and battle against each other and not against all the other external things that can occur. And so in that moment, it was a situation where we all know how Serena got upset and really took it out of context to one degree, and it kind of took it away from the match itself to talk about and focus on her character. But when you've got 20,000 people booing, and you're trying to think on your toes, my focus at that moment was really trying to say, okay, this was a great tournament for both of you. You both played extremely well, and we didn't want it to end, with that situation on the court. That's not the outcome that we were looking for with how things unfolded. And not, I wasn't referring to the outcome of who won the match. And so that was taken out of context by, Twitter sphere, et cetera. And so that's one of the reasons why I actually opened the book with that scene, with the dynamics of it, and to really get my explanation out as to what I felt in that moment and how I had to deal with it on the fly. That's my tennis skill on one side, dealing with adversity and kind of saying, okay, I got to stay calm, cool, and collective. And then also my broadcasting skill on the other side of having an even tone in that process. But you better believe I was sweating underneath that dress. I can tell you that.
It was a great dress, by the way. Beautiful dress.
Thank you.
And it was such an amazing tournament in itself. I love the Open, but that moment was just something that, where actually kind of goes into this next question from Nicholas, mental toughness. So he says, mental toughness is a huge aspect of tennis. One stutter could change the whole match. What are some ways you kept yourself centered in close matches? And if there was one thing you did to keep yourself calm, what was it?
Yeah, one thing about our sport is repetition is everything, right? And so we really have to rely on what we've practiced. They say practice makes perfect. Nobody's perfect, but just understanding that all the hours that I put into practicing and training, I have to rely on those elements in that moment, or in those moments where your back is against the wall, and not try to freak out on the score or the atmosphere or what have you. I actually had little notes or a piece of tape on the inside of the throat of my racket that had 4 or 5 different things that I could, just kind of look at as far as staying calm, breathe, keep my feet moving, whatever that might be, that would keep me calm in those situations.
And actually, the last question from the audience, as an athlete, what does the preparation from the end of a Grand Slam to start the next Grand Slam begin? I mean, obviously, we go from Australia to the French. So there's a good amount of time in between, but the French hits right into Wimbledon, which basically goes right into the US Open in a 3-month period. So and they're different surfaces for people who
Yeah.
aren't tennis fans. So what preparation do you have to take to get to the next tournament?
Well, I mean, your off season really is a month of December. Tennis is a year-round sport. So in that month of December or half of November going into December, you're taking the first couple of weeks off to do nothing. You're not picking up a racket, you're going to the beach, you're going with family, whatever that might be, to just kind of retool, right? Or refuel, and get energized to start going into what we call training blocks. And you build yourself up in these training blocks. You don't go hard every single day. You're doing multiple different things. It could be physical today, it could be mental tomorrow, it could be on court the next day. And then you start to bring them all together. Because once January starts in Australia, the year is long. And there are, you do take 2-3 week blocks here or there, but there's a tournament almost every week. But you're going from the hard court, the longest season. So you're in Australia for about a month. You come back to the US. You normally have Indian Wells, Miami. The women are in Charleston this week, the first week of clay, going over into Europe. But really going between the French and Wimbledon it's only 3 weeks. It used to be 2 weeks when I was playing. The end of Roland Garros to the start of Wimbledon, you had 2 weeks, which was huge disadvantage for a lot of players coming off the clay into grass. So the mentality has to change from being very patient to then going into an aggressive mode of play. And you can see it from Rafa, who's been able to change his grip and change his strokes from the clay to Wimbledon. But going back into the hard courts in the heat of the summer in America is very challenging. So it's really about the mental preparation that you're doing, but you have to be 100% physically fit because that really controls your energy and longevity mentally.
And so we don't actually have any more questions, but the King of Clay, I'm very excited to see what he does again this year. He's my favorite. But is there any last words that you would like to tell us? Anything that we missed, just as our closing remarks?
No, first of all, thank you for your attention and your questions. Own the Arena is a book for everyone, for every age, every gender, every ethnicity. It's really a chance and an opportunity for you to find yourself immersed in what your goals are and in owning your arena. As I mentioned at the top, your arena can be your classroom, your job, your office, wherever you are, that is your space. And whatever your goals are to expand beyond that, you really need to focus on making sure you surround yourself with your network. These are people that you work with, that you can rely on, that you can share thoughts back and forth and continue to learn. Your village is really your family and friends who are there to support you no matter what. But take control of your destiny by owning your possibilities, and good luck.
Well, I thank you for spending some time with me today. I know we didn't get to talk too much at World Team Tennis this season because it was so crazy and in those little 3.5 weeks. But I thank you for talking with us today and letting me pick your brain. And I want to thank the Sport Business Conference for having both of us today. I really appreciated talking to you, and I can't wait to see you back on tour.
Thanks, Melissa. I'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.